Hey everyone, my name's Kelvin and welcome to my tutorial for the Watercolor for Procreate kit. In this video I'm going to show you how to set everything up on your iPad, and we're also going to do a little project at the end where we paint this watermelon slice, and I think this is a good example to start with because it will show some of the main features that this kit offers, and it's a great easy starting point for anyone. So the first thing you'll do is actually download the kit to your iPad. I think the best way to do that is whether you bought it on Creative Market or Etsy or any of the other websites, just go to that website on your iPad and then download it directly. I think that's easier than downloading it to your laptop and airdropping it or something. Once the file is downloaded, you can just go into your file browser app like this. And depending on when is the last time you used this app, it may automatically be set up for recent files. And now there's a problem with this setting. Just when you go to open up the watercolor kit, always make sure you go over here to the Browse tab. Make sure that one is blue. And then you can go to your Downloads folder and then just look for the file that we downloaded. So in this case, it's Watercolor for Procreate 5.5 and it's a zip file. The number of yours, it might have a different number. Just at the current time here, this is the latest version. And to unzip a file on the iPad, you don't need a third-party app. In fact, I recommend uninstalling any third-party apps for unzipping files because the iPad now comes with a really cool, really high-quality unzipping program, and it will probably do better than most of the apps that you may have used in the past. So to unzip this, all you have to do is just tap it, and it will automatically start unzipping, and that'll take a moment. And after it's done, you'll see the folder, and you can just tap that to go inside. And inside this folder, there's a couple files, a README, and another folder. These are the actual brushes, and then here's the watercolor texture. And you need to use both of these together in Procreate to get the full watercolor effect. So let's load the texture first, and I'm just going to click on that, and it will automatically go to Procreate, and that'll take just a moment. And when it's all done, it'll usually open that one up. It may not, though. It may open up Procreate to your last illustration that you are working on, and you'll have to go to the gallery page and then look for the most recent document that's added. And this is what the watercolor texture looks like. If you zoom in here, you can see the paper texture, although it might not be super clear on this video. The next thing we need is the brushes. So I'm going to go back home, and I'll go to the file browser again. It'll open up where we left off, and then here's the brushes. And to send those to Procreate, I'll just tap on that file, and it'll import it. And you can find those brushes in the brush panel. And if you don't see them, usually they're going to show up at the top, but if you don't see them, you may have to scroll up a little bit. Often I find Procreate will hide the most recent brushes, and you just have to kind of scroll up the list. And it's called the Aquarelle brushes, version 5.5. And here are all the brushes. And to learn all these brushes, I did include a little cheat sheet. If I go to the watercolor texture here and open the layers panel, you see there's a very top here, there's this top layer called brush information. If I make that visible, that'll explain what all of these brushes look like and what I like to use them for. But again, it's just going to be up to you, and you're going to sort of develop your own workflow over time, but this will get you started. Now the paper texture works by applying the texture to everything underneath it. So always make sure that whatever you're painting is underneath it, otherwise it won't have the watercolor texture. And I can show you an example of that. So here we have the watercolor texture. Let's look at this one. Maybe this will be easier. So we have the watercolor texture here. But if that's this layer. If I move this above the watercolor texture, you can see it's very smooth. It doesn't look watercolor at all. So make sure all of your artwork is done underneath the texture like that. Another thing I want to mention is if you want to add more layers, you can just duplicate the layers like that. It doesn't matter. There's nothing special about these layers. Just make sure that whatever you draw is underneath, and you can add layers like this, or you can duplicate layers like that. Just make sure it's always underneath the watercolor texture. And I'm going to delete or hide the default watercolor illustration there. And I'm going to select a different layer, and we'll zoom out here. And for this little demonstration, I'm just going to paint a simple watermelon slice. So I'm going to grab my brush. The brush is here, and I'm going to grab the pencil brush, and I'll just do a quick sketch. Okay, so I basically have a sort of triangle drawn here. Now I want to do my watercolor on a different layer than the pencil because I'm going to delete the pencil later on. So I'll just go above it here, and I'm going to grab, I think, maybe a reddish color like this. And I'm going to go to the brushes, and I'm going to choose the abstract round brush. I think we might be able to do this whole project with just the one brush. So we'll make that a little bit bigger, and I'll just sort of rough out this watermelon. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to go back to the brush kit, and I'm going to go down here and select the water blender brush. And this is the brush we use to sort of mix everything together. You can mix different colors together. In this case, I'm just going to sort of blend in some of those hard edges, these edges here that you see. One thing you can get carried away with on the iPad is you have so much control to undo and to edit and to erase that you sort of get sucked in. But it's okay, just let it be. Let it kind of happen how it does, and it will look like watercolor. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to do a little trick here because on a watermelon slice, it fades basically from red, and then over here by the rind, it sort of becomes kind of gray or white, and then it fades to the green sort of outer skin. So what I'll do is I'll grab the selection tool, and I'll make sure it's set to freehand. And I'm just going to make a selection that covers this part of the watermelon. And if I go over here to feather, it will sort of soften that edge. There we go. And I'll go over here to the magic wand adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll raise the brightness of that, but I'll also lower the saturation. And typically when you raise the brightness, you always need to lower the saturation. Otherwise the colors will just become kind of crazy, kind of too intense. And I like how this is fading. I want to add the rind here, so I think I'll choose a kind of a yellowish color, and we'll see how that looks. Same brush, the abstract round brush, and we're all doing this on the same layer. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to grab the green, kind of a dark green color for the actual rind. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to grab that water blender again, and I'll fast forward the video now, but I'm just going to sort of blend everything together and make it a little bit more smooth. Okay, that's looking pretty good. There's another little trick I want to show you. If I set the brush maybe kind of small, I can sort of add this kind of spidery watercolor texture. This happens when you mix different densities of watercolor pigment together, and they'll kind of flow through each other. So this is how you can kind of simulate that using this kit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. It's almost done. I think at this point I just want to maybe saturate the tip of it a little bit. So I'll grab my selection tool and just sort of select the tip. I'll fade that one out, and I'll darken it just a little bit, just a tiny bit there, and then saturate it a bit. There we go. It's looking pretty good. This does look a little bit too consistent, so I'll go in there with the water blender again and just kind of make it a little bit uneven. Now, if you notice your illustration looks sort of flat, maybe the colors are too consistent, another trick I like to do is use this automatic selection tool, or the freehand selection tool, and I'll just make a random selection that sort of covers just a few areas of my illustration. So this area, that area, and that area. And I'll feather it out a lot. And then I'll go to the magic wand adjustments here, hue, saturation, and brightness. And then I'll shift the hue just to sort of a slightly different color, just a tiny shift. So it's sort of going more pink in those areas. And that adds this kind of natural variation that I really like. Okay, we'll deselect that. And I think to finish this up, I'm going to add some seeds. So we'll zoom in here. And I'm going to make another layer above this slice just in case I want to change these seeds later on. I'll use the same brush, the abstract round brush, or actually I'll use the fine liner pen, and I'll choose a dark color like that. And we'll just do some sort of random teardrop shaped seeds. That's a little bit of a small brush, so I'll make it a little bit bigger. And there we go. I think this watermelon is done. I'll go ahead and hide the sketch, those sketch lines you see in the background. And this kit offers the ability to turn off the paper background but retain the texture on your artwork. And the way that works is if you go to the layers panel, you'll see this layer called Watercolor Texture 5.5. If you open that up, you'll see a layer that says paper background. If you just uncheck that, it'll automatically hide that, but it won't mess with your illustration. And this is handy when you want to export this because some of you might want to export your artwork as a PNG image with a transparent background. And there's a few more steps to do that. You can't just export it like you normally would. So I will put a video in the description explaining how to turn an artwork like this into a PNG with a transparent background. But in this case, I just want to export it as a JPEG image with a white background. So I'll go to my wrench, I'll click Share, and then JPEG, and then I'll save this file by going to Save Image, just like that. So that's it for the quick little watermelon slice tutorial. Now I want to go over some frequently asked questions that I get with this kit, maybe some issues you might have. The first one is, how do you make copies of your watercolor texture? So let's go to the gallery page. So here's our watermelon, and let's say we want to draw something else, but using that same texture. What you can do is go over here to the little plus in the corner. Actually, not the plus, sorry. Go to Select. You can just check that one like that, and then click Duplicate. And that'll take a second. There we go. So now we have two instances of this watermelon slice, and I'm just going to go over here and click the X. That'll get us out of that select mode. And I can go in here and hide that one and draw something else. And then when I go back to my gallery page, I have two little different watercolor texture documents, and you can keep duplicating them as many as you want that way and have as many watercolor illustrations going at one time that you want. Another issue you might have is if I go to my file browser here and I go to my, let's go back here, downloads. I mentioned earlier about the issue with recent. What's happening is if you have this option selected and you're in recent mode, you tap this, like nothing happens. You want to unzip it so you can get at the files, but when you tap the zip file, nothing happens. For some reason, the only way to unzip files is to go to Browse, go to your Downloads folder, manually find the file, the zip file that you downloaded, and then click it, and then it unzips without any problem. I'm not really sure why that's the case. Another thing I want to mention is some of you were having trouble with your brushes. For example, you were using the brushes and they don't look anything like what you see in the video. So there's two things that can cause that. One of them is you need to make sure you have an Apple Pencil. As far as I know, the Apple Pencil is the only device for the iPad that has the pressure sensitivity. So if you're using just touching with your finger or using a third-party pen, it may not work as well. Another thing that can happen is make sure that you're painting underneath the watercolor texture. If you paint above it, just like I showed you earlier, you won't have that watercolor texture. And then the final thing that can cause that is your pressure curve. So what that is, if I go to the wrench over here and I go to Preferences, Edit Pressure Curve, it should look like this. If there's some crazy thing going on in here like that, just reset it, because any weird shape in here will make the brushes behave really strangely. So just if you have a weird pressure curve or a custom pressure curve, just reset that and the brushes should work fine at that point. So that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. My email does come with this product. You can find it in that README text file that I showed you earlier. Just send me an email. I'd love to help. I can get back to you right away and we can solve the problem. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.